Thexnor stepped off the transport ship and felt the artificial gravity of the station pull at his 4 legs. The metal floor was cold under his claws. He had traveled far from his home world to reach this place, a military station floating in the darkness between stars. 6 months ago, his people had formed an alliance with a species called humans. Now they would fight together against the Hrazk Empire. He walked through the corridor, his long neck allowing him to see over the equipment scattered along the walls. Other Kelvari warriors moved past him, their scales gleaming under the bright lights. But there were others, too, smaller creatures with only 2 legs, walking upright. Humans. Thexnor had seen videos of humans before, but seeing them in person was different. They were so small compared to his people. A Kelvari warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall on 4 powerful legs. These humans barely reached 6 feet, balancing on just 2 thin legs. Their skin had no scales, no armor, just soft flesh. They looked fragile, weak, but they moved with energy. One human jogged past him in the corridor, something Kelvari would never do without reason. Running wasted energy. Yet this human seemed to run for no purpose at all. "You must be Thexnor," a voice said. A human stood before him wearing a uniform covered in symbols. The human's face was darker than others Thexnor had seen, with short black hair. "I'm Captain Jake Martinez. Welcome to Joint Station Osiris." Thexnor lowered his head in the Kelvari greeting. "Captain, I am honored to serve in this unit." Jake smiled, showing his teeth. Thexnor knew this was not a threat display among humans, though it would be among his own kind. "We're glad to have you. Come on, let me show you around." The captain walked quickly, and Thexnor followed. They passed through several sections of the station. Jake talked constantly, pointing out various rooms and facilities. The mess hall, where both species ate together, the training rooms, the medical bay. Jake's voice carried an energy that seemed excessive to Thexnor. Why did humans need to express so much emotion about simple facts? They entered a large briefing room where other soldiers waited. Thexnor saw his squad leader, Krelvath, sitting with 3 other Kelvari. But there were 8 humans as well, scattered among the seats. One human female with red hair tied back was cleaning a weapon. Another human male was laughing at something on a datapad. "Everyone, this is Thexnor," Jake announced. "He's the last member of our squad. Now we're complete." The humans looked at him with interest. The female with red hair nodded. "Amy Sullivan, good to meet you." "Ben Crawford," said the laughing human, a large male with scarred hands. "Don't worry, the Kelvari are easy to work with. You guys actually think before you shoot." The other humans laughed. Thexnor didn't understand the joke. "Kyle Chen," said a younger human with a kind face. "I'm the medic. If you get hurt, I'll patch you up." Thexnor took his place next to Krelvath. His squad leader's scales showed patterns of concern. "These humans are strange," Krelvath whispered in their own language. "They make noise before battle. They laugh at danger. I have seen them train. They hurt themselves on purpose to become stronger." "Are they foolish?" Thexnor asked. "I don't know," Krelvath admitted. "But they survive. That must mean something." The briefing began. Jake stood at the front with a holographic display showing a moon called Theta 7. "Our first mission together," he said. "The Hrazk have a supply depot here. We're going to hit it hard and fast. Get in, blow their supplies, get out. Simple." Thexnor studied the display. The depot was well defended. 3 guard towers, walls, patrol patterns. A proper assault would require careful planning, days of preparation, perhaps a week. "We leave in 18 hours, Jake said. 18 hours? "Thex, nor felt his scales ripple with surprise. That was barely enough time to memorize the terrain. "Any questions?" Jake asked. "Captain," Krelvath spoke up, "what is our retreat plan if the enemy has reinforcements?" Jake's teeth showed again in that smile. "We adapt. Trust me, we've done raids like this 100 times. You'll do fine." After the briefing, Thexanor joined the other Kelvari in their quarters. They discussed the mission in careful detail, analyzing every possible outcome. This was the proper way. The Kelvari had survived for thousands of years by being cautious, by thinking through every decision. Later, Thexanor wandered toward the human quarters. He heard loud noises inside. Music, humans called it. Organized sound that served no tactical purpose. He peered through the open door and saw something that confused him deeply. The humans were sitting together in a circle. They were eating and drinking. Jake was telling a story about a previous battle, and the others were laughing. Ben was arm wrestling with another human while others cheered. Amy was showing Kyle pictures on her datapad, photos of a small human child. They were celebrating. Before the battle. Before they knew if they would survive. "Want to join us?" Jake called out, spotting Thexanor at the door. "I don't understand," Thexanor said honestly. "You fight tomorrow. You could die. Why do you celebrate now?" Jake's expression changed, became more serious. He stood and walked over. "Because we might die tomorrow," he said simply. "That's exactly why we celebrate now. These people around me, they're my family. If tomorrow is our last day, I want to remember tonight. I want to laugh with them, share food with them. That's what makes us human." Thexanor looked at the gathered humans. They weren't ignoring death. They were facing it directly and choosing joy anyway. It was the opposite of Kelvari philosophy. His people avoided risk, calculated everything, preserved life above all else. But humans ran toward danger. They bonded through shared risk. They celebrated before knowing the outcome. For the first time, Thexanor felt something he couldn't name. Not quite respect, not quite fear, something in between. These creatures were either very brave or very foolish, and he couldn't tell which. "Come on," Jake said, putting a hand on Thexanor's armored shoulder. The touch was gentle despite being completely useless against Kelvari armor. "Sit with us. Try some of our food. You're part of the squad now." Thexanor entered slowly. The humans made space for him in their circle. They offered him strange foods and asked him questions about his homeworld. They included him without hesitation, as if he had always been one of them. As the evening continued, Thexanor watched and listened. He was here to fight alongside humans, but now he wondered if the real challenge wouldn't be the battle itself. The real challenge would be understanding these bizarre, energetic, fearless creatures who laughed in the face of death and called strangers family after a single day. Tomorrow would be his first mission with them. Thexanor felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Anticipation mixed with uncertainty. The humans seemed confident, almost eager. He hoped their confidence was justified. Because if it wasn't, they would all die on Theta 7. And these humans would die still laughing, still joking, still refusing to show the fear that any sensible creature should feel. That thought disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. The moon. Theta 7 was a dead place. Thexanor looked through the ship's window at the gray surface below. No atmosphere worth breathing, just toxic gas that would kill most creatures in minutes. The Hrask had built their supply depot in a valley between two mountains surrounded by walls and weapons. The transport ship shook as it entered the thin atmosphere. Thexanor checked his armor seals for the third time. Beside him, Krelvath was doing the same. Proper procedure. Check everything twice, then check again. The humans were checking their equipment too, but differently. Ben was singing something under his breath. Amy was recording a message on her data pad, probably for her family. Jake was reviewing the mission plan one last time, but his movements were relaxed, almost casual. 2 minutes to landing, the pilot announced. The Kelvari grew silent, entering the calm state before battle. They slowed their breathing, focused their minds. This was the Kelvari way. Become still. Become ready. The humans got louder. They started talking more, making jokes, hitting each other on the shoulders in what they called encouragement. Ben laughed at something Kyle said. Jake was grinning. The ship landed hard on the rocky surface. The rear door opened with a hiss, and toxic air swirled in, blocked only by their armor's shields. "Move out," Jake ordered. They ran from the ship in formation. The Kelvari moved in their traditional pattern, using cover, staying low. The humans moved faster, more aggressively. They spread out wider than Kelvari doctrine recommended. Too much risk, too much exposure. But they reached the first checkpoint without contact, then the second. The depot's outer wall came into view, dark metal against gray rock. Thexnor had to admit the approach was working. They were making good time. Perhaps human methods had some value after all. Then everything went wrong. Lights blazed from the wall. Alarms screamed. The Razk had been waiting. This wasn't a supply depot. It was a trap. "Ambush!" Krelvath shouted. "Fall back to defensive positions!" The Kelvari warriors immediately reversed course, moving toward cover. This was standard procedure. When surprised, retreat and regroup, analyze the situation, form a new plan. But the humans didn't retreat. "Push forward!" Jake's voice came through the communication system. "They're dug in. We can't let them get organized." Thexnor watched in disbelief as the humans charged. Not toward cover, toward the enemy. Weapons fire lit up the darkness. Energy bolts screamed through the toxic air. Ben was running straight at a guard tower, firing his weapon continuously. Amy was behind cover but moving forward with each shot. Kyle was running in a zigzag pattern, somehow avoiding the incoming fire. "They're insane," Krelvath said beside Thexnor. "They'll all die." But they weren't dying. They were advancing, and the Razk were falling back, confused by the aggressive assault. "We have to support them," Thexnor heard himself say. He didn't know why he said it. The tactically sound decision was to retreat. But leaving the humans to die alone felt wrong. "You're right," Krelvath said quietly. "For better or worse, they're our squad." The Kelvari warriors opened fire from their positions, providing cover for the insane human charge. Thexnor aimed carefully, each shot placed with precision. The Kelvari way, accurate, controlled. The humans fired constantly, almost wildly. But they were moving so fast that the enemy couldn't track them. Their aggression was their protection. Thexnor saw Ben reach the base of the guard tower. The human pulled out an explosive charge and attached it to the tower's support beam. He didn't even take cover before detonating it. The explosion threw him backward, but he was already rolling, already firing his weapon at the next target. The tower collapsed. The Razk defensive line broke. "All units, push through the breach," Jake ordered. They poured through the gap in the wall. Inside the depot, Razk soldiers were scrambling to respond. They had expected a careful, measured assault. Instead, they got chaos. Thexnor saw Amy take a direct hit to her armor. The impact would have broken Kelvari ribs. She stumbled, fell to one knee. Thexnor started moving toward her to provide cover for her retreat. But Amy didn't retreat. She raised her weapon again and kept firing. Her face was twisted in pain behind her helmet's visor, but she didn't stop. She didn't even slow down. "Amy's hit!" Kyle shouted, already running toward her. "I'm fine!" Amy shouted back. "Keep moving!" She wasn't fine. Thexnor could see the damage to her armor, could see the way she favored her left side, but she was fighting anyway. Kyle reached her position, staying low. He did something to her armor, probably injecting medicine. Then they were both moving forward again. The battle became a blur. Thexnor had trained for combat his entire adult life, but he had never experienced anything like this. The Kelvari fought with precision and care. The humans fought like a natural disaster, like a storm that couldn't be stopped or reasoned with. Ben was laughing, actually laughing, as he threw grenades and fired his weapon. The sound came through the communication system, wild and strange. Who laughed during combat? They fought deeper into the depot. The Hrask kept falling back, kept dying. The humans kept pushing forward, kept attacking. There was no pause, no moment to regroup. Just constant, relentless pressure. Thexnor found himself fighting beside Jake. The human captain moved like water, fluid and fast. He saw threats before they appeared, responded to danger before Thexnor even noticed it. "On your left," Jake shouted. Thexnor spun and fired, hitting a Hrask soldier he hadn't seen. Jake was already moving, already shooting at the next target. They reached the depot's central storage area. Rows of supplies stretched into the distance. This was their objective. "Ben, do your thing," Jake said. Ben moved through the storage area, placing explosive charges with quick efficiency. He was still humming that song from before. Thexnor realized the human had been humming the entire battle. "Charges set," Ben announced. "We've got 3 minutes." "Everyone out," Jake ordered. They ran. The Kelvari moved in organized retreat formation. The humans just ran, fast and hard, racing the clock. Thexnor emerged from the depot and kept running. Behind him, the explosions began. Not one blast, but dozens. A chain reaction that tore through the entire facility. The shock wave hit his back, pushing him forward. They didn't stop running until they reached the extraction point. The transport ship was already landing, its door open and waiting. Thexnor collapsed inside the ship, his 4 legs shaking with exhaustion. Around him, the Kelvari warriors were doing the same. The battle had lasted less than an hour, but it felt like days. The humans were breathing hard, too, but they were celebrating. Ben was laughing again. Amy was gripping Kyle's shoulder in thanks. Jake was counting heads, making sure everyone had made it back. "1 Kelvari wounded, minor injuries," Krelvath reported. 2 humans wounded. 1 moderate. "Could have been worse," Jake said. "Good work, everyone." Thexnor stared at the human captain. Good work? They had walked into a trap, fought through impossible odds, and somehow survived. That wasn't good work. That was impossible. But they had done it. The humans had turned certain defeat into victory through pure aggression and refusal to accept failure. The ship lifted off, leaving the burning depot behind. Thexnor looked at his fellow Kelvari warriors. They all had the same expression, the same confusion in their eyes. They had witnessed something that defied everything they knew about combat. The humans didn't just fight battles, they fought reality itself, forcing the universe to bend to their will through sheer determination. And what disturbed Thexnor most was the realization forming in his mind. If he had to fight humans, instead of fighting alongside them, he wasn't sure his people would survive. These creatures were dangerous in a way the Kelvari had never encountered before. They didn't fear death. They ran toward it, laughing and singing and refusing to stop. Thexnor felt something cold settle in his chest, not respect anymore, something closer to fear. But he couldn't tell if he feared for the humans or feared the humans themselves. Thexnor couldn't sleep. He lay in his quarters on the station, thinking about the battle on Theta 7. 3 days had passed, but the memories remained sharp. Amy Sullivan, fighting with broken ribs. Ben Crawford laughing while throwing explosives. The way humans ran toward danger instead of away from it. He needed to understand them. His people had formed this alliance believing humans would be useful but manageable allies. Now Thexnor wasn't sure the Kelvari truly understood what they had allied with. The medical bay was quiet when he entered. Amy was there, sitting on an examination table while a medical device scanned her side. The human doctor, Lisa Park, was reviewing the results on a screen. "Thexnor," Amy greeted him, smiling despite the obvious discomfort. "Come to check on the wounded?" "I wanted to understand something," Thexnor said. "You were badly hurt in the battle. You should have retreated. Why didn't you?" Amy glanced at Lisa, who nodded. "That's a good question," the doctor said. "One that actually has a biological answer. May I explain?" "Please," Thexnor said, moving closer. Lisa pulled up an image of a human body on her screen. "Humans evolved on a planet we call Earth. It was and still is a dangerous world. Many predators, harsh weather, natural disasters. Our ancestors had to be tough to survive." She highlighted the human skeletal system. "We're persistence hunters. We don't have claws or armor like your people. We don't have venom or natural weapons. So we evolved something else. Endurance. Our ancestors would chase prey for days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. We just kept going." Thexnor stared at the image. "Days, sometimes weeks," Amy added. "There are stories of ancient humans tracking wounded animals across entire continents." Lisa continued her explanation. "Our bodies have special chemicals called hormones. When we're in danger, we produce adrenaline. It makes our heart beat faster, gives us more energy, and most importantly, it reduces our sensitivity to pain." Amy felt that injury, but the adrenaline allowed her to keep fighting anyway. "You can ignore pain?" Thexnor asked, disturbed by the concept. "Temporarily," Lisa said. "It's a survival mechanism. Fight now, deal with the damage later. Of course, it has limits. If Amy had been hurt worse, even adrenaline wouldn't have helped. But for moderate injuries, yes, we can push through things that would stop other species." Amy touched her bandaged side. "It hurt like hell afterward, though. Still does." "Then why do it?" Thexnor asked. "Why risk making the injury worse?" "Because the mission wasn't finished," Amy said simply. "And because my squad was still fighting, I couldn't leave them." Over the following days, Thexnor spent more time with the humans. He watched them train, and what he saw troubled him deeply. They practiced close-quarters combat with intensity that bordered on violence. They hit each other, grappled, fought with controlled fury. Jake noticed him watching and approached. "Want to try?" "Try what?" Thexnor asked. "Hand-to-hand combat. Well, hand-to-claw in your case." Jake grinned. "Come on, I'll go easy on you." They entered the training ring. Thexnor was much larger than Jake, with 4 legs providing stable balance and claws that could tear through most materials. This should be simple. Jake moved first, impossibly fast. He ducked under Thexnor's defensive strike, got inside his reach, and swept one of his legs. Thexnor stumbled. Before he could recover, Jake had struck 3 points that would have been lethal on a real battlefield. "Again," Jake said, stepping back. They sparred for 10 minutes. Thexnor never landed a single blow. Jake moved like water, finding weaknesses Thexnor didn't know he had. The human was relentless, creative, adapting to every strategy Thexnor tried. Finally, Thexnor had to stop, his breathing heavy. "How?" he asked. "You're smaller, weaker physically. How do you fight so effectively?" Jake sat down, not even breathing hard. "Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. Thousands of years of war, developing new ways to hurt each other. Every human learned some form of combat growing up. It's part of our culture." "You fight your own kind?" Thexnor was shocked. The Kelvari had conflicts, but internal wars were rare. We used to, a lot, Jake admitted. It's better now, but yeah, we're really good at fighting because we practiced on ourselves first. We learned every dirty trick, every technique. We know how to hurt things because we know how to hurt ourselves. That night, Thexnor joined the humans in their mess hall. Kyle was there eating something he called pizza. Thexnor sat across from him. Kyle, may I ask you something personal? Sure, Kyle said, taking another bite. On Theta 7, you ran through weapons fire to reach wounded soldiers. You could have died. One of those soldiers was Kelvari, someone you barely knew. Why risk your life? Kyle put down his food and looked at Thexnor seriously. Because you're one of us now. The moment you joined this squad, you became family. And we don't leave family behind. Ever. Even if it's tactically unsound. Especially then, Kyle said firmly. Logic says leave the wounded, survive to fight another day. But humans aren't just logical creatures. We're emotional. We bond. We create packs, families, tribes. And once you're in our pack, we'll die before we abandon you. That seems inefficient, Thexnor said quietly. Maybe, Kyle agreed, but it's what makes us human. It's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We care too much. We refuse to give up on people. Sometimes it gets us killed, but sometimes it's the only reason we survive. A few days later, Commander Eric Stone called a meeting. He was a senior human officer, older than most of the squad, with gray hair and tired eyes. We've received new orders, Stone announced. The Hrask are consolidating forces on their fortress world, Drax Prime. Intelligence says they're preparing for a major offensive. High Command wants us to hit them first, disrupt their preparations. Krelvath studied the holographic display of Drax Prime. That fortress has been standing for 300 years. It has never fallen. We would need an army. We have an army, Stone said. Combined Kelvari and human forces, thousands of soldiers. This will be the biggest operation of the war so far. It will also be the bloodiest, Krelvath said quietly. Yes, Stone agreed without hesitation. Casualties will be high. I won't lie to you about that. This mission is going to be hell. The room fell silent. Thexnor felt his scales tighten with fear. A rational fear. Drax Prime was a death trap. I understand if anyone wants to transfer to a different unit, Stone continued. No shame in it. This is volunteer only. Nobody moved. Not the Kelvari. Not the humans. Jake stood up. When do we leave? 48 hours, Stone said. After the meeting, Thexnor found himself alone with Jake in the corridor. You volunteered without hesitation, Thexnor said. You know many of us will die on Drax Prime. Doesn't that frighten you? Jake was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he finally said. It scares me. I'd be an idiot if it didn't. Then why go? Because being scared isn't a reason to quit, Jake said. Fear is just information. It tells me this is dangerous, that I should be careful, but it doesn't tell me to run away. We chose this life, Thexnor. We chose to stand between danger and innocent people. That choice means something. Your people are strange, Thexnor said. I know. Jake smiled. But we're your people now, too. You're coming with us, aren't you? Thexnor realized he had already made the decision. Against all logic, against every survival instinct his species had developed over millions of years, he was going to Drax Prime. Yes, he said. I'm coming. Good, Jake said, gripping his armored shoulder. We'll need you there. You Kelvari bring something we humans lack. What's that? The ability to think clearly when everything is going wrong, Jake said. We charge forward. You keep us from being completely reckless. We make a good team. As Jake walked away, Thexnor stood in the corridor thinking. He had joined this unit to fight alongside humans. But he was learning that the real challenge wasn't the fighting. It was understanding how humans could be terrified and brave at the same time, how they could fear death and embrace life with such intensity. He had 2 days before they left for Drax Prime, 2 days to prepare for battle, 2 days to prepare himself for what he would see when humans faced their greatest test yet. The thought should have comforted him. Instead, it filled him with an emotion he couldn't name, something between dread and anticipation. Because he knew that whatever happened on Drax Prime, nothing would ever be the same afterward. He was about to see what humans truly became when pushed to their absolute limit. Part of him desperately wanted to know. Part of him feared the answer. The assault on Drax Prime began with fire falling from the sky. Thexnor watched from the transport ship as orbital bombardment lit up the fortress world's surface. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers across the planet below. It was beautiful and terrible. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. Around him, soldiers prepared for battle. Hundreds of troops packed into dozens of ships, all descending toward the same objective. The fortress city of the Razg Empire, a sprawling complex of walls and weapons that had never fallen in 3 centuries of war. The ship shook as they entered atmosphere. Anti-aircraft fire exploded around them. One nearby transport took a direct hit and spiraled away, burning. 30 soldiers, gone in an instant. They landed hard in a storm of weapons fire. The rear door dropped, and Thexnor ran out into chaos. The ground was torn and smoking from the bombardment. Buildings burned all around them. The sound was deafening, overwhelming. "Squad, on me!" Jake's voice cut through the noise. "We push for the eastern gate!" They moved through the ruins as a unit. The Kelvari maintained their spacing, covering angles. The humans pushed forward aggressively, but stayed coordinated. They had learned from each other over the months of fighting together. The first day was brutal. The Razg fought desperately to hold their positions. Every street was a battle. Every building had to be cleared. Casualties mounted on both sides. Thexnor saw soldiers fall, both human and Kelvari. The medics worked frantically, but there were too many wounded. By nightfall, they had advanced only 3 city blocks. They took shelter in a partially destroyed building, setting up defensive positions. Amy organized watches. Ben checked their ammunition supplies and shook his head. They were already running low. "We need to conserve ammo," Jake said. "Make every shot count." "Like the Kelvari," Krelvath said with a tired smile. That night, Thexnor couldn't rest. He walked through their defensive position, checking on the soldiers. The Kelvari warriors were silent, conserving energy. Many showed signs of deep worry. This battle was worse than any of them had expected. The humans were quiet, too, but differently. They sat in small groups, talking softly, sharing food. Kyle was bandaging Ben's arm where shrapnel had cut through his armor. Amy was writing in her datapad, recording the day's events. "Can't sleep?" Jake asked, appearing beside Thexnor. "Too much to think about," Thexnor admitted. "We've lost many soldiers already, and we've barely begun." "Yeah," Jake said quietly. His usual confidence was muted. "This is bad. Worse than intelligence predicted. Perhaps we should request permission to withdraw, regroup, and plan a better approach." Jake shook his head. "High Command won't approve retreat. They need us to keep the Razg occupied here so they can hit other targets. We're committed now. Even if it means dying here?" Jake looked at him with tired eyes. Even then. The second day was worse. They pushed deeper into the fortress city, but the Razg resistance grew fiercer. The enemy knew every street, every building. They had traps and ambushes waiting. Thexnor's squad became separated from the main force during a fierce firefight. They took cover in a collapsed building surrounded on 3 sides. The communication systems were damaged by electronic interference. They were alone. "We're cut off," Krelvath said, his scales showing patterns of deep concern. "Standard doctrine says we should find a defensible position and wait for rescue. Or we could fight our way back to friendly lines," Ben suggested. "Through 3 enemy positions? That's suicide," one of the Kelvari warriors protested. "Maybe," Jake said, studying his tactical display. "But staying here is slow suicide. We're low on supplies. No reinforcements coming. We either break through now, while we still have strength, or die here slowly." The Kelvari warriors looked at each other. This went against everything they had been taught. Unnecessary risk. Poor tactical thinking. "I say we fight," Amy said. Her armor was scorched and dented. Blood stained the inside of her helmet, but her voice was steady. "Me too," Kyle agreed. The medic had been fighting as hard as anyone, his supplies almost exhausted. One by one, the humans voted to fight. Then slowly, the Kelvari did too. Even knowing it was probably futile, they chose action over waiting to die. They moved out at midnight on the 2nd day. The fortress city was dark except for fires burning in the distance. They traveled in complete silence, using night vision equipment to navigate. They made it 2 blocks before the Rask found them. The ambush was sudden and vicious. Energy weapons lit up the darkness. 2 soldiers went down immediately, 1 human and 1 Kelvari. "Keep moving," Jake ordered. "Don't stop." They fought through the ambush, moving constantly. Ben threw grenades while running backward. Amy provided covering fire from whatever position she could find. The Kelvari aimed with precision, making every shot count since ammunition was so low. They broke through the first enemy position, but the alarm was raised. Now every Hrask in the area knew where they were. The 3rd day became a nightmare of running battles. They fought from one position to the next, never stopping, never resting. Sleep became impossible. They ate while moving. The wounded who could walk kept fighting. Those who couldn't were carried. Thexnor lost track of time. Everything blurred together into one endless fight. He saw things that would haunt him forever. Amy fighting with 2 broken ribs and a concussion, refusing Kyle's orders to stand down. Ben jury-rigging explosives from broken Hrask equipment and disabled mines. Jake coordinating their movement with a calmness that seemed impossible given the circumstances. But what truly terrified Thexnor was seeing the humans' eyes during combat. There was something in them that wasn't quite sane, a determination that went beyond logic or reason. They were hurt, exhausted, starving, but they refused to stop. On what Thexnor thought was the 4th day, though he couldn't be sure anymore, they were finally surrounded, trapped in the remains of what had once been an apartment building. The Rask had them pinned from all sides. Ammunition was almost gone. The wounded outnumbered the healthy. Krelvath sat beside Thexnor behind a pile of rubble. "This is it," he said quietly. "We've fought well, but it's over." Thexnor looked around at their position. His squad leader was right. Any logical analysis said they were finished. The honorable thing would be to surrender. But when he looked at the humans, he saw something different. Jake was reloading his last weapon. Amy was checking her armor seals, preparing for the next engagement. Ben was actually smiling as he arranged their final few explosives into something that might work one more time. "Jake?" Thexnor called out. "What do we do?" The human captain looked at him. There were dark circles under Jake's eyes. His armor was so damaged it barely functioned, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "We break out." "That's impossible," Krelvath said. "Probably," Jake agreed, "but impossible just means nobody's done it yet." He outlined the plan. It was insane. They would use their last explosives to blow a hole in the weakest enemy position. Then, they would charge through in the confusion. It would be close-range fighting, brutal and desperate. Most of them would probably die. Or, Jake said, we all definitely die here. Your choice. Thexanor realized something in that moment. The humans weren't being reckless. They understood the odds just as well as the Kelvari did, but they refused to accept defeat. They would fight until the very end, not because they couldn't see death coming, but because they could see it and chose to spit in its face anyway. I'm with you, Thexanor said. As am I, Krelvath added. The other Kelvari nodded. They had learned from the humans. Sometimes the brave choice and the foolish choice were the same thing. They prepared for the breakout. Ben placed the last explosives at key points. Amy volunteered to provide covering fire, which meant staying behind. Jake refused. Nobody stays behind. They all go together, or not at all. The explosives detonated at midnight. The enemy position erupted in fire. In the confusion, the squad charged. What followed was the most brutal fighting of Thexanor's life. Hand-to-hand combat in the darkness. Soldiers grappling with each other, using knives and claws when ammunition ran out. The humans fought like demons, screaming and striking with a ferocity that terrified even their allies. Thexanor saw Jake kill 3 Hrask soldiers with his bare hands after his weapon jammed. Saw Amy use her damaged helmet as a club. Saw Ben laughing as he wrestled an enemy twice his size. They broke through. Somehow, impossibly, they broke through. 30 soldiers had entered that building. 18 came out. They were broken, bleeding, barely functioning, but they were alive, and they were moving toward friendly lines. As the sun rose on what Thexanor hoped was the 5th day, they stumbled into a forward operating base. Reinforcements surrounded them. Medics rushed forward. Thexanor collapsed. His 4 legs simply stopped working. Around him, other soldiers were doing the same. The humans, too. Finally, allowing themselves to fall. Jake was the last one standing. He counted heads one final time, making sure everyone was accounted for. Then he sat down heavily and let his weapon fall from his hands. "We made it," he said, and his voice was full of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe it. In that moment, Thexanor finally understood what he had been seeing all along. The humans weren't fearless. They were terrified. But they had learned to carry their fear like a weapon, to use it as fuel instead of letting it control them. And that, Thexanor realized, was what made them truly dangerous. Not their weapons, not their tactics, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat was logical, especially then. For the first time in his life, Thexanor had faced genuine fear, not fear of the enemy, fear of his allies and what they were capable of becoming when pushed to the edge of death itself. 3 weeks after Drax Prime, Thexanor walked through the medical bay of Joint Station Osiris. His wounds had healed quickly with proper treatment. Kelvari physiology was efficient that way. But some injuries went deeper than flesh. He stopped at a bed where Jake Martinez lay, his right arm ending at the elbow. The limb had been crushed beyond repair during the final breakout. The doctors had removed it to save his life. "Hey, Thexanor," Jake greeted him with that same smile. "Come to check on the wounded? How are you feeling?" Thexanor asked. "Like I'm missing something," Jake joked, then laughed at his own humor. "The doctors say I can get a prosthetic. Apparently the new models are better than the original. Stronger. Built-in tools. I'm basically getting an upgrade." "You lost your arm," Thexanor said slowly. "And you're joking about it?" "What else can I do?" Jake asked. "I could be sad, I could be angry, but it won't grow back. So, I might as well find the humor in it. Besides, I'm alive. That's what matters." Thexnor moved to the next bed. Amy Sullivan was there, lying on her back. Her legs were covered in medical equipment. The doctors said the nerve damage would take months to heal. She might never walk normally again. "They're talking about discharge," Amy said when she saw him. "Medical retirement. Send me home to recover." "Will you go?" Thexnor asked. "Hell no," Amy said firmly. "I'll heal. I'll do physical therapy. I'll work twice as hard as before. And then I'll be back. They're not getting rid of me that easily." "Why?" Thexnor asked. "You've done enough. You've sacrificed enough. Why continue?" Amy looked at him seriously. "Because this is what I chose. This is who I am. And because my squad is still out there. They'll need me again someday." That evening, Thexnor found Kyle in the station's observation deck. The young medic was staring out at the stars, a drink in his hand. "Mind if I join you?" Thexnor asked. "Sure," Kyle said, making space. They sat in silence for a while, then Thexnor spoke. "On Drax Prime, you ran through weapons fire dozens of times to reach wounded soldiers. I need to understand. You told me we were family, but is that really enough reason to risk death?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. "My species has a word," he finally said. "Courage. It's different from fearlessness. Fearlessness means you don't feel fear. Courage means you feel it and act anyway." "That sounds exhausting," Thexnor said. "It is," Kyle admitted. "Being human is exhausting. We feel everything so intensely. Fear, love, anger, joy. It's like living with all your senses turned up too high. But that intensity is also our strength. We care deeply. We bond strongly. And once we commit to something or someone, we don't quit. We can't. It's not in our nature. Even when quitting is logical. Especially then," Kyle smiled. "Humans aren't the most logical species. We know that, but we're the most stubborn. We're the ones who see impossible odds and say, 'Not good enough, we're doing it anyway.' That stubbornness has saved us more times than I can count." A few days later, Thexnor was summoned to meet High Commander Vexistar, the supreme military leader of the Kelvari forces. The old warrior studied Thexnor with wise eyes. "You fought at Drax Prime," Vexistar said. "You survived when many did not. I have read the reports, but reports only tell part of the story. I want to hear your assessment of human combat capabilities." Thexnor thought carefully about his answer. "They are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered." "More dangerous than the Hrask?" "Much more dangerous," Thexnor said. "The Hrask fight for conquest. They fight until the cost becomes too high, then they retreat. Humans fight differently. They fight for each other, for ideas, for principles, and they never stop. Not when hurt, not when outnumbered, not when logic says they should quit. They simply keep fighting until they win or die. There is no middle ground." Vextar listened intently. "This troubles you?" "Yes, Commander, because I realized something on Drax Prime. If we ever had to fight humans instead of fighting beside them, we would lose. Not because they're stronger or smarter, but because they won't accept defeat. They'll take casualties that would break any other species and keep coming. They'll turn impossible situations into victories through sheer refusal to quit." "Is that a weakness or a strength?" Vextar asked. "Both," Thexnor said honestly. "It gets them killed unnecessarily sometimes, but it also makes them nearly impossible to defeat. They are terrifying allies and would be nightmare enemies." Vextar nodded slowly. "I am sending new doctrine to all Kelvari units. We will adapt some human tactics, particularly their emphasis on aggression and momentum. But we will balance it with our traditional caution. Perhaps together we can create something stronger than either species alone." "I believe so, Commander," Thexnor said. 2 days later, there was a ceremony. Admiral Sophie Grant, the human fleet commander, presented medals to the survivors of Drax Prime. Thexnor received a human commendation for valor. He stood at attention as Jake pinned the medal to his armor with his remaining hand. "You earned this," Jake said quietly. "You and the other Kelvari. You didn't have to stay with us during that breakout. You could have surrendered, but you chose to fight. That takes real courage." "I learned from humans," Thexnor said. "And we learned from you," Jake replied. "You kept us from being completely reckless. You made us think, made us plan. We make a good team, Thexnor. The Kelvari and humans together. We're stronger than either species alone." After the ceremony, Thexnor found himself alone with Jake. They walked through the station's corridors, two soldiers who had seen hell together and survived. "I've been offered a new position," Jake said. "Training officer, teaching new recruits. They think I've done enough frontline fighting." "Will you accept?" "No," Jake said. "I'm getting that prosthetic arm. I'm going through rehabilitation, and then I'm coming back to the squad. If Amy's too stubborn to quit, then so am I." Thexnor felt something warm in his chest, something like pride. "I've also been offered a new position. They want me as a permanent liaison to human forces, to help coordinate between our species." "Will you accept?" Jake asked. "Yes," Thexnor said, "because I understand now. What you told me before was true. We're family, and I'm not leaving my family." Jake stopped walking and looked at Thexnor. His eyes were serious. "You know what that means, right? More missions, more battles, more chances to die." "I know," Thexnor said. "I'm afraid. I've been afraid since Theta 7. Every battle, the fear is there. But I learned something from humans. Fear isn't weakness. Fear is information. It tells me to be careful, to be smart. But it doesn't tell me to quit." "Now you're thinking like a human," Jake smiled. "No," Thexnor corrected gently. "I'm thinking like someone who fought beside humans and learned what courage really means. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling fear and choosing to act anyway. That's what I saw on Drax Prime. That's what humans taught me." They continued walking. The station was busy with soldiers going about their duties, Kelvari and humans working together, learning from each other, becoming something new. "I had a realization on Drax Prime," Thexnor said. "In that building, when we were surrounded, I finally understood. I had faced genuine fear, but not of the enemy, not of death. I was afraid of you, of what humans become when pushed to the edge." "Should I apologize for that?" Jake asked. "No," Thexnor said, "because I also realized that fear was the beginning of something important. I was afraid because I didn't understand. Now I do. You're not monsters, you're not fearless, you're just people who refuse to let fear control you. You feel it, acknowledge it, and then do what needs to be done anyway." "That's probably the best description of humanity I have ever heard," Jake said quietly. They reached the training rooms where new squads were forming. Mixed units, Kelvari and humans learning to fight together. The future of the Alliance. "New mission briefing tomorrow," Jake said. "Another difficult operation. The Hrask are pushing into the Kepler sector. Command wants us to stop them." "Dangerous?" Thexnor asked. "Very," Jake confirmed. "Probably the worst odds we've faced yet." Thexnor felt that familiar fear rise in his chest. But this time, he understood it. This time, he didn't let it control him. "Then we should get some rest," he said. "We'll need our strength." Jake smiled and gripped Thexnor's armored shoulder with his remaining hand. Welcome to the squad, brother. Glad to have you with us. As Thexanor walked back to his quarters that night, he thought about everything he had experienced. He had joined this unit thinking humans were strange, reckless creatures that needed Kelvari wisdom to survive. He had learned the truth was far more complex. Humans were terrifying. They were dangerous. They were stubborn and emotional and sometimes irrational. But they were also loyal, brave, and absolutely committed to those they considered family. They turned impossible situations into victories through sheer determination. They refused to accept defeat even when defeat was logical. And now Thexanor was one of them. Not human, but something close. A warrior who had learned to carry fear like a weapon, to feel terror and fight anyway, to choose courage over comfort. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new dangers, new chances to die. The thought should have filled him with dread. Instead, he felt ready. Because he wouldn't face those dangers alone. He would face them with his squad, with his family, with humans who had taught him what true courage meant. He had faced genuine fear while fighting along humans, and in facing that fear he had discovered something precious, the strength to be terrified and stand firm anyway, the courage to look at impossible odds and say, "Not good enough, we fight anyway." That was the human gift. Not fearlessness, but the courage to fear and fight regardless. And now it was his gift too. Tomorrow would bring new battles. Thexanor would be ready. He would be afraid, but he would fight anyway. That was what it meant to be truly human, or to have learned from them, which amounted to the same thing.